Okay, so this is the cross-examination of the 911 dispatcher that called, saying that she thought it looked odd and they may need help on scene.
You may be the actual call taker. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so as a call taker, a citizen calls 911, you pick up the phone and respond to whatever that call for service is. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you will type it into a system. That information will get sent over to a dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
And the dispatcher is the person who is in charge of communicating with and assigning officers to calls, correct?
Correct.
And there are days when you show up for work and you're assigned to be the dispatcher, correct?
Correct.
You also described a third part of your job is to be the fire dispatcher, which is separate from police.
Correct.
Now, in preparation for trial, I believe on March 2nd, you met with members of the prosecution team, correct?
Correct.
And you made a statement, apparently made a statement that police is more fluid than fire. What did you mean by that?
Correct. So when fire calls come in, let's start over. There are most generally not times where the fire department comes upon an issue. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen where we can assign a rig that's come across someone who might be down on the ground or anything like that. But when a structure fire comes in, it's not because they were out driving around. It's because someone called, saw flames or smoke, whatever prompted them to call, and then we send the rigs to where they need to go.
Okay. So basically, whereas police, they may be driving around and they may just see two people fighting on the corner, stop and have to deal with it, right?
Correct.
And so dispatching to police officers is a different process than dispatching to fire.
You are correct.
All right, so we've got the call taker, the dispatcher, the fire dispatcher, and what was the fourth aspect again?
We call it our Channel 7. It's an information channel. We mainly use it for officers coming in for off duties.
Okay.
Or when someone reports a lost child, we have different computers that we use to make sure we can log them appropriately in our national database.
Okay. So the Channel 7 responsibilities may include, when you say off duties, those are police officers who are hired as security at local businesses, things of that nature?
Yes.
So even though the officer is not on duty as a Minneapolis police officer, a business hires them and they still act as a police officer, correct?
Correct.
Now, and then there are the lost children, things of that nature.
Yes.
Right? You also described that the city of Minneapolis is comprised of 5 precincts, correct?
You are correct.
First precinct being downtown, is that correct?
Yes.
And downtown is broken into 2 sectors, correct?
Correct.
And then you have the second precinct, which is the northeast, right?
Correct.
The third precinct, which is the southeast, right? The fourth precinct, which is the North Minneapolis, northwest side of the city, right?
Correct.
And the fifth precinct, which is the southwest side of the city.
You are correct.
All right. And each of those 5 precincts, like the first precinct has 2 sectors. The third precinct, you said, had 4 sectors, right?
Correct.
And so essentially, there would be 2 squad cars downtown, 4 in southeast Minneapolis, and that's the totality of the police force in those 2 parts of the city. I mean, as far as patrol.
Patrol. At certain times, it can be more. It depends on the shifts and when they're on.
So there may be an event or a concert, and they may bring in extra people, or something's going on where they would need extra officers?
Correct.
And oftentimes, there are fewer officers than are assigned sectors, correct?
There's usually always at least 1 squad per sector.
Okay. But those, like, officers call in sick or they go on training, and so the numbers of officers on the street at any time shifts from time to time.
Correct.
And it's fair to say that as a dispatcher, you're not a police officer, correct?
Correct.
You have not been through the police academy, through police training, things of that nature.
Correct.
But you don't know all of the police officers.
So right here he's trying to make her not act like, because the prosecution made her act like this expert witness that works as a police dispatcher, that knows the procedure, and she saw this outrageous conduct. Yet when she called and talked to the sergeant, her conversation wasn't urgent, And it wasn't like, I see this one officer kneeling on him and I think it looks really bad. It was basically, hey, car's moving. It took 3 people to get him out. They haven't called for a sergeant yet, but it looks odd out there. They've been out there for a long time. That's basically what she said. It wasn't this damning, I saw the officer being rude and mean and bad. So he's trying to make sure the jury knows you're no type of expert.
We had some kind of video to show us, anything like that. Then other than that, we are always on a phone or radio.
Okay. Now, you said that there are 6 televisions, you believe, in the dispatch room? Is that right?
Throughout the whole center, there's 6 on the walls, 2 large ones on the ends, and then there's 1 in fire.
Okay. So
9 total.
9 total. Sorry, I had to do some quick math.
See, the laughing and joking is keeping her easy so she doesn't get defensive. So it's not like I'm trying to make you look bad and she's kind of trying to help the prosecution. So this is relaxing your witness.
Time, do they?
No, they do not.
Those televisions may have other information up, they may be off. I mean, they're not constantly on all the time.
They're always on, but you are correct. They're not always on cameras. We have other information that we put on those screens that we can have constantly running as reminders. We also have other screens that we utilize throughout the day too.
All right. And then in front of you, you have 4 or 5 different computer screens itself. It sounds like it's a very, moving job, right? Now, how you testified that it's very rare that you actually see an incident that you've dispatched on these city cameras.
Correct.
Like, does it happen once a year? Like, is this the first time you remember it ever happening? How rare would you say it is?
I can't be specific, but there might be, in the whole time that I've been a dispatcher, maybe 3 to 4 calls that I've seen on our TVs.
Okay. And usually, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that may be brought up is because there's something that triggers someone to operate that camera and put it up, right?
Correct.
So you don't control the cameras.
You are correct.
You don't have access to the cameras through any of the screens in front of you. Is that right? Someone else who maybe like a manager or a supervisor has to do that?
Correct.
All right. But this incident was specifically brought up on the cameras, right?
Yes.
All right.
Why?
Now, I got this on.
Why was it brought up and who brought it up?
You also were previously interviewed in connection with this case by Special Agent Brent Peterson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was back on June 9th of 2020 at approximately 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And that was at the FBI field offices, or where was that?
It was over the phone. I was not in town.
Okay. So you had a phone interview with Agent Peterson, and I believe you had your union lawyer or something with you as well, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure why she would have a lawyer to be interviewed unless she broke some sort of policy by doing what she did and she wasn't supposed to do that. Why would you need a union rep to be interviewed unless you want a protection about something you did? That doesn't make sense to me.
40, right? And you didn't necessarily know who the officers were assigned to those cars.
Correct.
Have you subsequently learned who the officers were who were assigned to those squad cars?
Yes.
So who was assigned to squad 320?
Officer Lane, and I do not know how to correctly pronounce the other officers.
King.
King.
All right. And squad 330 was Officer Chauvin and Officer Top, correct?
Correct.
Now, the way the lawyer just said King, they would have normally objected to that because he led her and didn't let her answer and he fed her an answer. But because everybody knows it, nobody's going to object and make it a big deal.
Squad 830 was for the Park Police.
I didn't.
Now, when this call initially came in, you again were not the call taker this day. You were the dispatcher, right?
Correct.
And so the call taker comes in, takes the call, you see the information that the call taker puts into the computer system, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that that information is also being seen in the squad cars of a Minneapolis squad car, right?
Correct.
So when the call taker types in this information, it's visible to the officers in the squad car.
Yes.
And it allows them to respond as well. You can respond.
That's good real-time
Lots of
information.
people can respond
Yeah.
to various calls, right?
Correct.
All right. I am going to go back to the court's permission. I believe this was Exhibit 151, which was the computer-aided dispatch. Can you see that in front of you?
Yes.
All right. Let's see if I can get rid of some of this stuff here. All right. Okay, so the call initially comes in at 8:02 and 13 seconds, correct?
Correct.
And as you described, that the caller reported that outside the reporting party that there is a male provided a counterfeit bill to the business. Suspect is a black male, 600 plus, I mean 6 foot or higher.
Yes.
Okay. Sitting on top of a blue Mercedes-Benz ML320 with the particular license plate. And it also noted that it appears this person is under the influence, right?
Correct.
So at the time that the call came in, you would have seen that this person was suspected to be under the influence by the caller, right? As would the officers in their cars.
Correct.
And so you indicated that you had initially did you say you radio dispatched Squad 330 to this call?
Initially, yes.
Right. And that was because, and do you recall where they were at the time you dispatched them?
No.
Excuse me. Back in June 9th, when you spoke with Officer Peterson, or Agent Peterson of BCA, would you dispute me if I said you told him that they were at the precinct at the time of the call?
I would not dispute you.
Okay. And so it's, at that time, you believe that Squad 320, which was the sector car, was tied up, but they had not cleared something from the computer? Is that right?
Right. They were still on the call that they had been.
What he just did is slyly kind of remind her that she gave conflicting testimony in her statement, and now she said, I didn't know where they were, but in a previous statement, she did know where they were. So he just kind of slid that in and refreshed her recollection, so to speak.
Me, whichever reported by a scent, whatever, there's a multitude of things, or they can clear themselves. On my screen, I have a status screen that shows me when a car is clear, when the car is en route, when they're on scene, and when they're code 4.
Okay. And so on one of these screens that's right in front of you, you have some sort of representation of each of the sector cars that you're responsible for dispatching. So if, for example, you have a call in Sector 310, and 310 is already occupied with some other call, you can send 320 or 330 or 340, or even somebody from a different precinct or sector, correct?
From a different precinct, it requires more conversations with a sergeant to pull response cars. It's a policy of calling people and getting their permission to use their cars. But yes, if someone is busy and I don't have a 360 or whichever precinct 60 car to use, then I have to go to the closest available. Or if there's no one who's close and I only have one squad available, that's the person that has to go.
Okay. So when you are looking at your computer screen, do you see all of the precincts' cars and their availability, or do you only see the second and the third precinct?
I only see the second and the third.
Okay. Now, so you indicated that ultimately Squad 320 kind of took the call back, right?
Correct.
They said, hey, we're clear, we're going to go handle this call at the Cup Foods, right?
Correct.
And you're familiar with the, you said you were familiar with the 38th and Chicago intersection?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And does it get a fair number of police calls to that area?
That I don't have the statistics for.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be able to rattle off of a yes or a no.
Well, in your
In the last
opinion,
year,
from your
yes.
experience in working.
Before that, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. Now, so again, Squad 30 was ultimately Squad 320 was ultimately backed up with Squad 830, the Park Police, and Squad 330, Officer Chauvin's squad car, right?
Correct.
And again, do you recall why you backed these officers up?
Initially, I believe I heard a loud something in the background. I would have to be reminded of
Okay.
what exactly I heard, but it was loud. And so until they were code 4, I started a squad to back them.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't just hear what an officer is doing at any given time, listen in on their calls, right?
No, they have to radio us to let us know what's going on.
All right. So when an officer pushes his button on his radio, or however they do it, it opens up the air or the microphone, so to speak. And that's what you're talking about. You're trained to listen, right?
Correct.
And when you spoke with Agent Peterson, do you recall telling him that you heard lots of yelling and things of that nature at one point when Squad 320 said they were taking one out?
I don't remember specifically. I believe I told him that because that was the reason why I asked for assistance.
Right. Squad 320 didn't call in and say, hey, we need help. You heard something that was concerning to you and you sent help.
Correct. And then when they said they were taking one out, had they said that first, I would have also started it then.
Right. And so Squad 830 was the first to respond?
Yes.
And I believe that they responded, let's see, at 8, 10, and 38 seconds, right?
These actions right here, the one with my numbers where it says backed up with 320, or 320 with 330 and 330 with 830, that is me using my tools at dispatch to just back them up. I don't see the arrival times on here.
Okay. So this, you see here, 525 at 20:12:21, 320 C4. That's code 4.
Correct.
Meaning all clear, right?
To my understanding, yes.
And then 830 out with 320 at 20:12:55. So roughly 40 seconds or 34 seconds later, Squad 320, or excuse me, Squad 830 is out with 320,
Correct.
right? And then there was an inquiry to get some information, right? And ultimately then at 8:20 and 11 seconds, there was a code 2 call for a mouth injury, right?
Correct.
Meaning, code 2 again, meaning just come in the matter of due course. No need to rush.
Routine, yes.
Routine, right.
Code 2 isn't routine. Code 1's routine. Code 2 is lights only.
So again, about a minute and 24 seconds later, Squad 330 EMS code 3.
Correct.
So someone assigned to Squad 320, either Officer Chauvin or Tao, called EMS and stepped them up to code 3.
Squad 330.
Squad 330, right, which would be Officer Chauvin or Officer Tao.
Correct.
All right. And they, code 3 means get here as quickly as you possibly can.
Emergency.
Right?
Correct.
Lights and sirens.
Correct. Sorry.
Now this particular document, Exhibit 151, does not have the arrival times, correct?
Not printed on it, no.
All right. Are you familiar with other documents or other printouts that would show various arrival times?
Yes.
And it would show other people who are associated with the case? Like what time, like who is assigned to which particular squad car?
Yes.
Okay. If I may have just a minute, if we could take this down, Your Honor. Mr. Frank, I'd be referencing Bates stamp 7438 for your information. Would it refresh your recollection, or would it help you to identify arrival times if you were to look at what's called an incident detail report?
Yes.
Ask you if you can show this screen to the witness. This hasn't been offered, Your Honor. I'm sorry?
I can't kill
Oh.
those screens, but not that one.
If I may have a minute.
I hope he replays when she talks to the sergeant to show her lack of emergency tone. She didn't seem that concerned. It was more an information call instead of a, hey, I think these guys are beating this guy up and they're using too much force. That wasn't the call, and that's the way the defense or the prosecution kind of wanted to play.
All right. Now, the incident detail report has a much more detailed time of like first keystroke of when somebody starts typing, what time officers arrive. Every single time is documented very closely, correct?
Correct.
Now, would you disagree if I told you that the phone was picked up from the 911 caller at 8:01 and 15 seconds?
I can't disagree with that.
Okay. And I know that you don't have this right in front of you, but because of some redactions, I just have to walk you through these times.
Okay.
Would you agree or disagree, or would you agree that the first unit was assigned at 8:04 and 28 seconds?
Yes.
And that would be squad 330 was en route at 8:04 and 28 seconds.
Correct.
Then 320 took the call at 8:05 and 11 seconds and indicated that they were en route. So very short time, right?
Very short time.
Would you agree that if I told you that squad 320 arrived at Cup Foods at 8:08 and 10 seconds?
Correct.
He should have made his own timeline document that he could share that
Squad
wasn't redacted.
330 being assigned to Derek Chauvin, Tu Tao. Squad 830 being assigned to Peter Chang of the Minneapolis Park Police. Squad 320 being assigned to Officers King and Lane.
Correct.
How does she know it's correct? She's not looking at it. See, they don't want to object because then they'd be calling her credibility into wisdom, but she shouldn't be answering.
In terms of...
That may be what they're saying, objecting. He's asking her questions that she can't confirm. She's going on memory or just taken, so he's leading her. Without showing her the document, how can she say what he's saying is correct? He could be making up shit.
So just so you know, for those of you who just may be joining our coverage, this is how they conduct. Connected, they can all speak to one another, but don't have to gather in a group. The sidebar's over. Let's listen back in live. Or we thought it was over. It looked like they took off the headsets and then...
So, they're all talking and they can all hear each other. Normally they would call a sidebar. The attorneys would walk up to the judge and they would just whisper. But this way they can keep their distance and still talk and communicate like they're all at the bench when nobody else hearing them. Commonly called a sidebar. And on the sidebar, the witness normally is not included.
We're gonna go back to old school methods and print out some paper. We'll get there.
See, he could have made a timeline, had it typed out, had the defense and the prosecution agreed that the times were correct, taken from the document, and then he could show her, and then she could confirm what he was showing her.
To your honor.
This witness, I don't think, was that damaging to the defense. Basically, he wants to make sure that she corroborates all the times to show that it was a rapidly evolving event. They called for code 2 at first, then they went to code 3. That shows that the cops weren't being unconcerned about him. They were trying to get him help. It showed how quick it rapidly deteriorated into a fight. She heard people yelling, and she sent backup units without being asked for cover, which means it was a loud, rapidly evolving, chaotic situation. She knew it from what she heard.
All right.
So for purposes of stipulation, EMS code 2 for a mouth injury was called at 8:20 and 11 seconds. EMS code 3 from squad 330 was called out at 8:21 and 35 seconds.
So what they said in the sidebar is, look, I'll stipulate to the time since he's reading from that, but asking her to confirm it probably is inappropriate. So now he's just reading off facts, and he doesn't get her to maybe catch her misstating something.
It's 8:28 and 36 seconds. Am I reading that correct? So 8:28 and 36 seconds, EMS arrives, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then EMS didn't stay on scene, right?
No.
They left. And they indicated that they went to 36th and Park, right?
Correct.
And they didn't go to 36th and Park, did they?
EMS? That's where I believe they were.
Okay. So to your belief, they went to 36th and Park because that's what they called out, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall fire having trouble finding EMS at 36th and Park?
Yes.
Okay. Because they didn't go to 36th and Park, they went to 36th in Chicago, correct? Or do you not know?
I actually don't know. After those comments, I did not know that's where they went.
Okay. So ultimately, there was some confusion between fire and EMS about where EMS actually was. And you heard that radio chatter.
I asked the questions on Metcom, which is reflected in there, and then relayed the information that I had at 36th and Park, which was also added into the call. Other than that, I didn't know their locations.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you said that you were watching this video, and you were still watching your rest of your work, right?
Correct. I was actively still working.
So you look up for a couple seconds, look down, do your work, look up, look down, from time to time throughout the course of this incident.
You're correct.
All right. And so it's fair to say that your attention wasn't necessarily focused directly on the cameras and what you were seeing.
Correct.
But it was concerning enough to you what you did see that you called Sergeant Pluger of the Minneapolis Police Department 3rd Precinct, right?
I was concerned. Yes, because of the time of the length of the incident had not changed.
Okay. So you called, we listened to your video, or the audio of your call with Sergeant Pluger.
So she didn't call because she thought the cops were doing wrong. She called because she hadn't heard from them and it was going on a long time. That's critical.
So the first time you spoke was at 8:30 and 44 seconds. And in fact, during that phone call, you must have looked back at the camera and saw that they were all gone at that point, right?
Correct.
Because you said something to the effect of, oh wait, they're all gone, right?
Correct.
And your time that you had called into the MetLink was at
This witness actually looks pretty good. I think
8:31 and 12 seconds. Does that sound right to you?
For the Metcom hail?
Right.
Correct.
Then ultimately, Squad 330 indicated that they were going out to check on the status, and it says AP of the AP. That's something that Squad 330 typed into the system.
Correct.
And that was at 8:55:08, right?
Correct.
Now, again, you were concerned because of the length of the time that you saw this incident unfolding, right?
Correct.
And I think you said that at one point you thought maybe the camera had even frozen.
Correct.
Right? Because it seemed to be kind of prolonged, right? You can't hear anything on that video, could you?
No.
You had no idea what officers were talking about amongst each other or what they were talking about with others who were present, right?
You are correct.
And again, you, not being a Minneapolis police officer, are not familiar with the use of force requirements, correct?
You are correct.
All right. But you are aware that when uses of force are made or used, sometimes you'll hear dispatch, the officer call for a sergeant because they need someone to review a use of force, right?
Right.
And you, at the time you called Officer Pluger or Sergeant Pluger, you hadn't received any sort of a dispatch from Squad 320, Squad 330, or Squad 830, hey, we need a sergeant to review the use of force.
You are correct.
Now, every single time the Minneapolis Police Department uses force, do they go through the dispatch process?
Of using the radio?
Well, to get to the sergeant to report the use of force.
no.
As far as I know.
Okay. So you don't know whether...
I would disagree. If a sergeant's on scene, they don't have to tell dispatch. If a sergeant shows up, there's no reason to go through dispatch. So they do not go through dispatch every time. That was he needs to point that out. She's incorrect.
heard that dispatch, right?
Correct.
And sometimes when a use of force incident occurs, that call may be to the sergeant to review the use of force, may be fairly quick, and sometimes it may take a few minutes, right?
True.
And
Yes.
it just depends on the circumstances and the situation, right?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that there were these TVs. There are more cameras within the city of Minneapolis than 6 or 9 TVs worth, right?
Yes.
Are the televisions, are they split screen where you can see 5 or 6 cameras at one time, or is it one big TV with one big camera?
It is split screens, and then you can go into different camera views.
Okay.
I think he needs to get her to say, the reason you called a sergeant was not
Looking back through my notes.
because
When
you
you
thought...
watched the video here in court, you said that it was similar to the video that you had watched previously, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that the video that we just watched in court seemed to be moving very slowly in terms of kind of choppy
Pace.
pace?
Yes.
Right. So an incident that you watched it in real time, subject to a few seconds of delay for the signal to get through, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to see if it makes a difference if we look at it on my computer.
As I was saying, I would point out that she did not call the sergeant because she thought any officer was doing something inappropriate. Because that's not why she called, but that's what the defense or the prosecution is wanting people to believe and make her believe. She called one time, only time she's ever called a sergeant, because it was so egregious that it cost her to do that. That's not the case.
If we could, this is Exhibit 11. Yep, oh, it should be plugged in. Can we put it up?
We're early in the trial. Who thinks the officer is going to take the stand?
It's day one, Your Honor. So. All right. So now when you watch the same video, it seems to be moving in a little faster time.
Correct.
Because these cameras actually transmit real-time occurrences.
Correct.
And you said that you first kind of took notice based on your estimate at 8:17. So I'm going to just skip forward here a little. This is 8:17 and 38 seconds. Back up here a little. So this is 8:17 and about 30 seconds, and this is when you first sort of took notice of these cameras on the squad car, right?
Correct.
Or at the call center. Now, in terms of the pacing of this, is this more consistent with real time?
Yes.
And one of the things you ultimately told Agent Peterson was how you noticed how the squad car was rocking back and forth during the struggle.
Correct.
I don't see the car rocking.
And if you could just watch this and tell me when you start to see that happen.
Whoa,
Well,
he's
it's
got her,
currently
because I don't
shaking.
see it rocking.
And now
Oh,
currently shaking.
right there.
And by rocking back and forth, the car is actually going forward, a little backwards, and it's happening over and over and over again, right?
Correct.
And it's happening pretty much
That's because he's fighting them.
of the interaction of the officers, right?
Correct.
And that back door is opening and closing on the officers, right?
Correct.
Now, the other things that you notice when you look at this intersection, this is a pretty busy intersection, right?
Correct.
Lots of cars coming by, lots of people wandering about. This was May 25th, pretty nice spring day.
Man,
in the
he's
middle of
kicking and fighting hard. We didn't see this
not long
video
after
before.
being cooped up inside here.
Correct.
So now ultimately, you observed and you saw these officers using force, right? Or what you believe to be force.
With taking him out of the squad?
Right. Or putting them in the squad.
Yes.
And there was, what you observed was a struggle between officers and the person they were arresting, right?
Correct.
And that the struggle ultimately resulted in that squad shaking back and forth.
Correct.
And when you ultimately called Sergeant Pluger, you said, I don't know if this is a use of force or not, right?
Correct.
And Sergeant Pluger told you that it could be just a takedown.
Correct.
And a takedown wouldn't require a supervisor.
Correct.
Ultimately, you know that Sergeant Pluger responded to the scene, right? And is that a, yes?
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. And that's confirmed in the computer-aided dispatch or the incident detail report, right?
Correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Frank, any redirect?
Okay, I'll let this go. This is redirect. The prosecution going to come back and try to remake his case.
Mr. Gray, just a few follow-up questions. I'm going to put 151 back up on the screen for you because I think in the questioning, I think counsel had asked you about MetLink, I think was the term he used. I just want to clarify that 2 points. So if we could put. And I want to just clarify those times as well. So if we go down to the time of 20:31:12, and if we could just expand that out so we could all see it a little better, please. I think counsel asked you about this 20:31:12, and that being the Metcom call. Having looked at this, what time was your Metcom call?
So the information I added was at 2033 for the Metcom. That is our resource that we use radio to radio in the metro, so we can be quick and be able to get information back and forth.
So that 20:33:02, what is the purpose of that entry right there? What are you reflecting?
I'm asking basically what is the reason why fire was added. I got on there and asked, what do you need fire for? Because there were no additional comments of saying why they were needed code 3.
And so what you've typed in there via Metcom is, and you sent out, yes?
Yes.
Is to tell what?
The information that I got via Metcom was that EMS would like the fire department for patient condition at the requested location of Park and 36th.
So that's the answer you got, is that that EMS wanted them to go there.
Correct.
And so that was information you received before 20:33:02, but you sent out at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
There's the time of me typing and putting it in there.
When you have referred to your work duties that day, you can take it down, thank you, as Channel 1, how does that signify you from other dispatchers?
We have 2 other channels. There's Channel 2, which is in charge of the north side, and then there's Channel 3, who has downtown in the 5th precinct, and then we have a relief dispatcher who's there to help us when we take our breaks or when we need to get up for any given reason.
So when you dispatch over Channel 1, does that go citywide or just precinct-wide?
Just on those 2 precincts. I have my own dedicated channel.
Having been questioned by opposing counsel about your call, as you sit here today, have you changed your mind about the reasons why you called Sergeant Pleeger when you did?
No.
You were asked about the number of screens that you have up, looking at all this, and still being able to see what was going on in this call from the city camera. That's been your work setup for about 7 years, correct?
Correct.
Something you do on a daily basis is keep track of all these moving parts.
Yes.
And that video that's up there, when it's not sending out work messages, can put up these city cameras, correct?
Correct.
But you don't control that.
Correct.
Do you know who or what office controls that?
It can change. Sometimes the supervisors at our center can pull up cameras. Like I said, sometimes we put them on there just to see what the weather is. Especially if we have inclement weather, if there's storms coming through, we can see actually how severe they are when people are calling in. Sometimes they put them up for incidences if we can see anything, and those cameras can be taken away from us. to the fact that the base, which is the precinct desk, has control over them and can move them to wherever they need to when they need to.
So what you're saying is that those cameras, where they're pointed and when they're available to you, can be controlled by members of the police department?
Correct.
And in your 6 years by this date and 7 years now, it's a rare incident for somebody to put an incident up on the screen like that.
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Now,
All right, thank you, Ms. Greer. You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
okay, so if the other attorney wanted to follow up on what he just asked, he could only talk and re-examine her on the things that he brought up. He can't bring up other stuff now because he had his one bite at the apple. Now, if he wanted to redirect, he could only redirect on what this guy asked. Since this guy didn't ask anything critical, there was no reason to redirect. They're going to just, excuse her. So, prosecution's probably going to call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state calls Alicia Euler.
So this is the third different prosecutor I've seen. They had the black prosecutor do the opening, they had the other guy do the question, and now this guy's calling a new witness. And I'm going to go ahead and make a new video. Hang on.